Hello and welcome to Dollars and Cents, the Australia Institute podcast where we explain just what the hell is going on in the economy. My name's Angus Blackman, I'm the executive producer of podcasts here at the Australia Institute, and I'm here filling in for Eleanor Johnston-Leake, who is away sick this week. But I'm joined in the virtual studio today by Australia Institute chief economist Greg Jericho. Hello, Greg.
Hi, Angus, and very sad to hear that Eleanor is unwell.
Indeed.
And
the budget might have broken her.
Weirdly, unlike me, when she's unwell, she doesn't come in and sit in a small confined space spreading germs everywhere like I do. But yeah, Eleanor, well done.
Yes.
Practicing good hygiene.
Yes.
Yeah, hopefully she is back firing next week.
Yeah, absolutely.
We miss you, and I'm sure Eleanor is listening to this to find out what's... No.
I'm sure this is the comfort listening she needs on a day
to help her get her through the cold
listening to the people she would have been spending time with were she not sick, who arguably make her sick. But we'll leave that. We'll leave that. So, Greg, the Prime Minister reckons we're not fair income about gas.
Why don't you want to break your word to gas companies when it comes to introducing a 25% tax on gas exports?
Well, this is something that's just come from a social media campaign.
The Australia Institute says it could raise $17 billion a year.
Well, the Australia Institute have run this campaign, but they need to be fair income about it as well. Gas companies pay $22 billion of tax last year, that they pay royalties, that they pay company tax as well as PRRT.
He was speaking on Perth radio last week and was asked about calls for a 25% gas export tax, something our research shows could raise $17 billion, a cool $17 billion a year. But Anthony Albanese dismissed it as a social media campaign. What'd you make of that?
It was a very interesting response by our Prime Minister. He was also, I think, in Parliament suggesting it was a campaign from the far right and the far left. Which is rather weird given the campaign actually originated with the ACTU. Yeah. I'm sure Sally McManus and Joe O'Neill just love being called extremists.
Yeah.
And no wonder he thinks it's a social media campaign, because if anyone follows the Prime Minister on Instagram or Facebook or any of these things, he'll announce anything, even if it's, here's a picture of me with my Labrador. There will be great. Now tax the gas.
The comments are lighting up.
I know it is rather annoying to the Prime Minister that his budget was not greeted with cheers and adulation, and instead has people saying great, nice, good stuff, but tax the gas. And his lines, unfortunately, in his interview were not. Let's just say the gas industry would have loved hearing them. His suggestions about how much tax they actually paid were straight from the gas industry media releases. It included royalties, which are not a tax, but actually the cost of paying for our gas. And unfortunately, all the offshore gas in Australia, especially on that northwest shelf, don't pay any royalties. Gas off of Darwin doesn't pay any royalties. 56% of our gas exported doesn't pay royalties, so I'm not sure why he's sort of boasting about that.
And just to be clear too, the thing that Richard Dennis says that really clarifies it for me, I think, is the comparison with a baker. So a baker pays for flour and then they pay company tax or whatever on top of that.
Yeah, and because the gas is owned by Australians, or if it's on land, it's owned by a state government. So just like with iron ore, just like with coal, just like with gold and every other mineral, you have to pay to actually mine that, because it's not yours. It's the population and it's the people's.
Yeah, we have to pay for microphones.
Yeah, and I sort of think of it a bit like if a property developer had this great idea for a resort, but the place that they wanted to build on was Crown land owned by the state government or the federal government. Well, the state government would not give that land to them for free and say, it's okay, you'll pay company tax later. Yeah. They'd say, you can have it, but it's got to cost you. They would sell them the land, and that's essentially what a royalty is.
Yeah.
They're not buying land, they're buying iron ore or coal or, in this case, gas. But the problem is if it's offshore, they don't pay for it, so they're getting it for free. So no wonder they're paying company tax because they're making such big profits because not only are they profiting off of the Iran war and the troubles still going
And
on
before
in
that,
Ukraine.
the war on Ukraine,
Yeah. Not only are they getting great prices for it, but they're getting it for free. So, yeah, no wonder they're making profits. So the Prime Minister really sort of lent into the gas industry's lines. Richard Dennis on Instagram and our socials did a really excellent quick fact check of it. It's not every day. He did also call out the Australia Institute, suggesting that we needed to get fair dinkum and, you normally might panic if the Prime Minister of Australia was having a go at you, but the problem is we had the facts on our side, we had the research on our side, we had the numbers on our side, and I think perhaps the more annoying thing for the Prime Minister is we also have the public on our side.
Yeah, increasingly.
Support for a gas tax is very popular.
Yeah, and not going away. And so just for us non-economists, just as a little reminder, lightning round, what could the government do with $17 billion a year?
Oh, well, look, instantly it could put dental in Medicare and it would still have money to spare.
That'd be great because
Just
I haven't
think of
been to the
that.
dentist for 3 years.
Yeah, just think of that. Dental in Medicare. And we're not just talking, a little bit, you can go get a check. No, actual, be able to get fillings and things like that, get repair. Okay. Not everything, but enough that you're getting good basic, care of your teeth in Medicare. Done, paid for. We could make childcare free, free. Just like going to primary school, now you can put your kids in childcare, it's free.
Yep.
We could make universities at TAFE free. We could, more than double job seeker. We could massively increase the age pension. There are all this range of things. We could basically wipe out all the cuts to NDIS. In 29-30, the government is projecting that it will cut the NDIS by $16 billion. Well, $17 billion is more than $16 billion. So we could fund the NDIS.
By $1 billion. I'm not an economist, but...
So, we're not suggesting that the government do anything with the money, but what we're saying is look at all the things you could do. Look at all the choice and also just think how much more fun would it be for a government to think, look at all the good things we could do with this money from gas industry, from the gas companies that are getting their gas for free, that once it's gone, and that it's destroying the planet. So let's make them pay for some of that destruction.
Yeah.
And instead we are like, oh no, we've got to cut NDIS by $16 billion because it's out of control and we need to keep the budget in balance or whatever. And it's like, so
it's a good reminder, I think, that while we can't have everything that we want, we can basically have anything that we want.
Yeah, we're a rich country. We can have anything we want. Government just needs to choose to do it. They never have any problems choosing to spend an extra $10 billion on defense.
No.
But, if they want to be fair dinkum about, balancing the budget and paying for these good things, tax gas, and you can do these things. So no government minister, no government MP can say, oh, we had to make hard choices. Well, if you really want to needle them, say, well, you chose to hurt people with disabilities so that you wouldn't hurt gas companies. And that was the choice they made.
And again, finally, just on gas before we move on to some of the other issues going on in the world, what does our research show the export tax would do for domestic gas prices?
Yeah, to make it cheaper. That's a good way to think about it. Let's say the world, because gas prices around the world and to be honest, in Australia are all based on essentially a world gas price. It's no one has any market power, even though we're the second or third biggest exporter of LNG. We can't determine the price. We have to pay the world price. Now, let's say the world price is $10 for whatever a unit of gas. Well, if they were to sell that to Japanese or Koreans or anywhere overseas, the gas companies would get $10 minus 25% for the export tax. So they're getting $7.50.
Mhm.
Well, that means if they sell it to Australians, they don't pay the tax.
Mm.
So that means they could, so long as they sold it to Australians for more than $7.50, so if they sold it to us for $7.51 a unit, they're making more money than they would if they sold it overseas. So because there's not many of us here in Australia who can buy all the gas, because we certainly don't have the population of China, Japan, and Korea combined,
No.
there's going to be a real fight to sell gas to Australia so that they can make a bit more money than they'll make selling it on the world price. And that means they're really going to compete to offer us the lowest possible price they can. And that means cheaper gas for us.
Yeah, and it doesn't sound like much when you're talking about $7.50 versus $7.51, but when you're talking about 7.5 billion versus 7.51 billion, like, it ain't bad, right?
And it might change the situation where currently, Australians are often paying more for gas than Japanese consumers are paying for gas, gas that came from Australia. So
and Japan has no gas.
And
Japan has no gas.
Has no gas. Oddly, can export gas because it's buying so much of our gas at such good rates that it can then sell it on for a profit, and actually make more money out of it than the Australian government does, because we like giving it away for free. Japanese government actually taxes the imports of gas. Really weird situation.
Just before we move on, I just say if you want to find any more information on gas, our research, you can go to australiainstitute.org.au, or for shorter form analysis from our experts and people from outside the Australia Institute as well, visit thepoint.com.au. So last week we talked about the government's changes to the capital gains tax discount and negative gearing. Turns out not everyone shares your enthusiasm for the reforms. This is more Eleanor's area than me, as far more chronically online than I am. There's a meme war happening on the interwebs, Greg. Tell us about it.
Yeah, it's this completely false. This meme suggesting that because of the changes to the capital gains discount, which got rid of the 50% discount and said, okay, you're going to just pay a tax on the real earnings of your capital gains, as we've said in the past. So basically taking into account inflation. There's this line now that Anthony Albanese has become a 47% equity holder in my business.
Yeah, and it's coming from a lot of startups, right?
Yeah, because 47% is, of course, the top tax rate plus the Medicare levy. And they're suggesting that because of this, they're now going to pay 47%, which that's not how tax works.
It's Chris Minns, New South Wales Premier Chris Minns, was also out talking about this, claiming that people are working half the week for the government.
The top marginal rate of 47%, as I said in Parliament last week, you're working Monday, Tuesday and half of Wednesday for yourself, and then Wednesday, Thursday and Friday for the government. It's a tough burden for a lot of families to hit. Look, in a general sense, I know budgets are under pressure, but in a general sense, whether it's now or in the future, we do need to make sure we're taking urgent action when it comes to personal income taxes, because at the moment, a lot of working families are getting stung.
But that's not how tax works, is it?
I hadn't heard something this stupid from a person in high office since Joe Hockey did it back in 2014. Joe Hockey back in 2014 said exactly the same thing, that some people are working half the year in tax, essentially, saying they're paying nearly 50% of their income in tax.
And just for people who aren't on the tax bracket, top tax bracket, for example, how does that work?
This is how it works. We have what's called a progressive tax system.
Yeah.
The more you earn, the higher your tax rate goes. Yeah. So at the moment, the top tax threshold kicks in at $190,000, and just for reference, that puts you in basically about the top 3% of income earners in Australia.
Yep.
But so it's 45% plus the Medicare levy makes it 47%. So what that means, though, is only the amount of money you earn above $190,000 is taxed at that rate. So let's say you're on $200,000. You only pay 47% on the $10,000 above $190,000.
Yeah.
All the rest is paid at lower rates, at 37%, and then at 30%, and then down to 16%.
Yeah.
So this line that you actually pay or work half your week, as Chris Mims said, suggesting that, you're working Monday, Tuesday, and half of Wednesday for the government. It's complete bullshit, because what happens is even if you're on 190,000, part of your income has been taxed at 16%. That was the amount that you earned up to 45,000. Then the part from 45,000 to 135,000.
And isn't there a tax-free threshold in there as well? Or does that get cancelled?
There's an $18,200 tax-free threshold.
Cool.
So you paid no tax on that bit. Then from 18,200 to 45, you pay 16%. Then from 45,000 to 135,000, which is a fair range, you're only paying 30%. And then from 135 to 190,000, you pay 37%. So it's only up until you get to 190 do you start paying 47%. But again, it's only on that amount over it. So what that means is we can actually work out what's your average tax rate. And let's say you're on $500,000. You might think, they're going to definitely be paying 47%. No, your average tax rate at $500,000 is still just 40%. If you're at 200,000, so as I say, 200,000, you're in the top 3%.
Yeah.
Your average tax rate is just 30%. If you're on 100,000, and that puts you in the 30% tax bracket, but because of the tax-free threshold, because of that 16% rate, your average tax rate at 100,000, and this is including Medicare, is about 22.8%. Or to put it in days, this is a good way of thinking. How much do you have to earn before you're working for a day of tax? When you earn $76,800, that means one of your days out of your 5 is basically tax.
Okay.
When you earn 198,100, you're working a day and a half in tax.
Right.
To get to 2 days worth of tax, and remember, Chris Mims is saying you're working half the week, so 2.5 days. But to get to 2 days, you got to earn 483,800. If you earn $1 million, you're still only doing 2.2 days worth of tax.
Right. So for Chris Mims' statement to be correct, you have to be earning well clear of $1 million. In fact, is it even possible to get to?
No, you're never going to get there, because there will always be part of your income that was taxed at 30%, taxed at 16%, and part that was taxed free. It is a terrible line for a Labor premier of all people to be saying this, because what he's essentially saying is that those people earning more than 190,000 deserve a tax cut. And it's like, hang on, you're basically arguing in favor of the top 3%.
Yeah.
Because no one else is getting anywhere close to it. No one's even getting to working Monday and all of Tuesday for tax. Most people are working a day and a bit. You're paying about, 20 to 25% of your income is going in tax. And even half of my capital gains. Capital gains also work like that, but they have a 30% floor.
Yeah.
But you're still not paying 47%. You would have to be, to even get close to that, your startup would have to now be raking in billions.
Yeah. Which probably makes you not a startup anymore.
And also, you're realizing that money all at once. Because remember, capital gains are basically income you've got from earnings. So it's a case of, let's say I've bought a house and then I sold it. So it's that profit I get. Or I bought shares and I've sold it. Or I've started up a business and I'm beginning to earn a capital gain from that business. Well, no one's earning $1 billion a year in some, startup. This is not. Then you're a company.
Good for you.
Yeah, and then you're a company and you'd be on a flat rate of 30%. And the thing is also, small businesses there are so many exemptions in these changes. It's a complete absurdity. What this is about, at the end of the day, is trying to stop the tax system being used to speculate in housing.
Yeah. 1 week out from State of Origin 1, there's a very small dam of Will holding back a bunch of anti-New South Wales jokes, and there's lots of pressure on it right now. But you know, I'll leave it. The thing that I don't understand is that, like, the changes are about housing. Like, obviously, I understand that capital gains apply to, you know, lots of areas, but I don't get how the 47%, the income tax stuff, intersects with the capital gains stuff in the memes.
Capital gains are taxed like income. Yeah, it's still income. The difference was, under the old rules, you got essentially a 50% tax-free threshold. So if you made $100,000 through capital gains, you got a $50,000 tax-free threshold on that, and then it was added on to your income and you were taxed at whatever rate.
Yeah.
Now they're saying, no, what we're going to do is take into account inflation, work out how much your real gain was, and maybe your real gain wasn't 100,000. Once we take into account inflation, maybe you actually only made 60,000 because 40,000 was just how much inflation went up in that time. Well, now you're paying tax on 60,000. And they're also saying, okay, and we're going to set a minimum of 30%. And the reason they're doing that is because that stops people trying to game the system. You basically sell it when it is most advantageous for them tax-wise.
Yeah.
Sort of, we want Jim Chalmers trying to get rid of people, or at least reduce people abusing the system to avoid paying tax.
Or even, like, put another way, actually using the system that was put in place by John Howard.
Exactly.
It's all above board.
Yeah.
It's just
not even abusing it, actually using it exactly as John Howard wanted, which was to ensure that people who were making capital gains, you know, paid less tax. And where this is, and remember, you had to hold your asset for more than a year. So let's say you're a day trader, you're buying and selling shares, and this doesn't change at all because you weren't holding them for more than a year. You're buying it, selling it maybe a week later or 2 weeks later, taking advantage of news that has bumped up the price. It's only if you're holding those shares for more than a year and you decide then to sell them, well, you're going to have to pay tax on them in much the same ways as, again, we're taking into account inflation, saying, okay, you've made 5% gain on that, but inflation went up 3%. Okay, you only have to pay tax on 2% of your profits, not on, you know, whereas John Howard was saying, actually, you can get 2.5% free. So there's been a whole lot of misinformation. Yes, there's been some stuff about startups, because one of the problems with startups is they can start from $0. And so how do you work out exactly what was the percentage increase and things like that? There's lots of things in there. Jim Chalmers has been very clear. Look, the legislation isn't even before Parliament yet. There's going to be a lot of negotiation with startups to make sure that there aren't any unintended consequences. But as you know, Paul Keating put out a letter, and we'll get to it. He kind of pointed out, look, this is all just a smokescreen. If you've got a great idea and it catches fire, you're not too concerned about the capital gain, how much tax you got to pay, because you're still getting a discount.
Yeah.
No one else is getting, you know, when we put in our income tax returns, we don't say, oh, and by the way, can you take into account how much inflation went over the year? No, we just pay
the
nominal.
RBA's worst nightmare.
So, you know, there is a discount still. It's just a different discount. It's basically the old discount that we had before 1999. Life carried on quite well. Everything was good. There were still startups. There were still businesses. There were still houses being sold. There were still investors in the housing market. The economy did not crash. It was just fairer.
Yeah.
And this is what it's about.
This budget was an absolute stinker.
Will the Prime Minister rule out changing his mind about introducing a death tax?
This is simply a death tax by stealth.
It's best not to listen to the scare campaigns.
So some on the right are arguing that the government has introduced a death tax by stealth. But, Greg, I don't remember seeing that line in the budget.
No, it didn't make it in there. What they're talking about here is a thing called testamentary trusts, and more specifically, discretionary testamentary trust.
Oh my God, I'm already asleep.
Try saying that with a mouthful of marbles. What these things are, okay, we've talked in the past, a couple of weeks ago, we're talking about discretionary trust, family discretionary trust, where let's say you make a lot of money through investments, through assets, not through income, wages, but actually through investments and earnings and things and dividends and something. To avoid sort of or reducing the amount of tax you pay, you set up a family trust, you put everyone in your family in there, and you basically arrange the distribution of those earnings in a way that reduces the amount of tax you pay. Well, a discretionary testamentary trust is exactly the same thing, except it only comes into effect once the person who set it up dies.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say I get a lot of earnings through investments and everything, maybe even as, I've got ownership of companies and things like that. I've got a family trust where I've got all my family in it and I divvy it up, and that's great. We're all reducing our tax and everything. And I always think, right, in my will, I'm going to set up this testamentary discretionary fund, which will be exactly the same thing, except it only kicks in once I die.
Mm.
So basically, the family trust moves from being a family trust to the testamentary trust. Now, the key thing is a death tax would be if I put all of my earnings into a trust, the government says, right, we're taxing those earnings right now. So you're putting $3 million into this trust. We're going to take a tax on that. That's not happening, doesn't happen now, won't happen because of the budget. What happens now is that, okay, I put $3 million in there that is invested and is, producing a return that gets divvied up. When it is divvied up and given to my family as income, which is what it is in a trust, then it gets taxed because it's income, and income in Australia gets taxed.
Sure.
So these things are already taxed.
Yeah.
What Jim Chalmers and the government are doing is exactly like with discretionary family trusts. They're saying, yeah, we're going to put a minimum 30% tax rate on these things so you can't use them to minimize the amount of tax. They're not introducing a tax on them. They're not changing away. They're not saying, oh, these things that this income used to be tax-free, suddenly we're going to tax. No, they're just reducing the tax breaks, essentially.
Okay.
That's it. But here's some context. You might think, okay, I've never heard of these things.
Yeah.
What the hell are they? Well, just have a guess. There's about 16.5 million taxpayers in Australia.
Yeah.
How many testamentary trusts do you think there are? So 16.5 million taxpayers. Think, God, there's a lot of people dying each year. How many trusts of these testamentary trusts are there?
Given I haven't heard of them, maybe not many.
Yeah, not many is correct. 10,500,
Right.
or about 0.07% compared to how many taxpayers there are. They are very rare.
Yeah.
They're even rare amongst trusts. There's about 800,000 discretionary trusts, 800,000, but there's only 10,500 of these testamentary trusts.
And do we know much about the types, like the wealth of the people who use these things?
You only use them if it is actually worth doing because your investment earnings are so great that
Right.
using these and splitting them up actually improves your tax in a significant way. So you need to be, as we know, with discretionary trusts, most people, 90% of Australians don't have them, but more than half of people earning more than $500,000 a year have them. Why? Because they get most of their income from capital gains, from dividends, from other things than wages. If all you've got is wages, if all you've got is your family home, there is no reason to set these things up because inheritance is not taxed.
Yeah.
You're only setting this up if you've got ongoing investments that are so big that you want to pass those ongoing investments on to your family.
Mm-hmm.
You've already got them probably in a family discretionary trust. So you set up this testamentary one so it could keep going. So we've had this huge scare campaign disgracefully being led by the opposition on a thing that is barely even there. And unfortunately, we live in a media environment where instead of that being called out, the headlines become government struggling to counter claims of a death tax.
And just hypothetically, if Australia did implement an estate duty or, air quotes, death tax, it would be following in the footsteps of which other communist nations?
The United States of America,
yes.
led by Comrade Trump now.
Yeah.
Most advanced economies actually do have estate taxes. USA, UK has them. About 25 of the 33, I think it is, economies in the OECD, which are basically all the advanced economies, have them. These are not rare. We used to have them. We used to have them in Australia. They were mostly state-based ones. Joh Bjelke-Petersen in 1977, he was the Premier of Queensland. He axed it.
Friend of the show.
He axed it purely because he was hoping to entice retirees to move to Queensland so they would die there.
Fun fact, my granddad was put in lockup overnight in an anti-Joh protest.
That is something to be proud of. Because,
I think he's quite proud, actually.
And, so every other state followed. We used to raise about, to put it in GDP terms so we can sort of compare periods, we used to, back in the 50s and 60s, raise about 0.35% of GDP in estate taxes. That's about $10 billion a year. If we did it like the US, where they have a threshold of about $12 million, so if you've got less than $12 million in your estate, you don't pay any of this estate tax.
I think I'll be fine.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about that.
No.
I mean, even in Australia, think how many houses you'd have to own to get to 12 million. You'd at least have to own 10.
One on the southern Gold Coast.
One on the southern Gold. Yeah. They would, if we did it that way, we'd probably raise about $3.5 billion in revenue, which is why I kind of pushed back a little bit on. There's been a few progressives around go, oh yeah, maybe, they're calling it a death tax. Why don't they just do a death tax? I'm like, they're not even doing a death tax and they're getting slammed. Do you really want them to get absolutely bodied?
Yeah.
Just to raise $3.5 billion in tax? Why not just tax gas and get $17 billion and everyone's a hell of a lot happier?
Indeed. Amen to that, Greg. And on that note, I reckon that's probably all we've got time for today.
A really good note to end on. Finally, a positive one. Tax the gas.
Tax the gas.
That's just tax the gas.
If you want $17 billion a year.
If you want $17 billion to actually put dental in Medicare. If you'd like free childcare. If you think this would be a good thing for Australia.
Not telling anyone what to do.
Tax the gas.
Yeah.
We're just throwing out seeds, seeing if they take root. But yeah, we'll leave it there. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this week. We will be back with another episode of Dollars and Cents next week. And I took a bit of a sneak peek of what's coming up next week. We'll have a bit more inflation, new inflation figures out, and we're starting to get ready for the next GDP figures, which come out in the first week of June.
Very exciting.
This episode of Dollars and Cents was recorded on the 21st of May, and some things may have changed. If you'd like to read more about just how much bullshit there is in the death tax fear campaign, head on over to the Guardian Australia site and read my column there on the Grogonomics page. Or for more absolute great reading, lots of fact-checking on some of these scare campaigns, including my column calling out New South Wales Premier Chris Minns on suggesting that we're all working half of the week for the taxman. Head to thepoint.com.au and there is just a plethora of great reads there, including Paul Keating's statement backing in the capital gains tax discount that he put out on this morning, actually. So get on there, read it. It also has a really good graph in there on house prices. So check it out. As always, our music is from Blue Dot Sessions. Everyone, have a great week. Eleanor, hope you're well, and we'll see you all next week.
See ya.